The Spoon, the Crow, and the Other Child. Every story we hear, every tale we read, opens a door within our soul. The journey behind that door sometimes pulls us after a dream, and sometimes brings a forgotten memory back to life. The story I will tell you now is not an ordinary one. It is a story that sets out from a corner of the infinite universe and steps into your world. Every story has a starting point. Mine begins once upon a time with a child. Now, I will tell you the story of that child. Here is the boy I want to introduce you to. Every morning, just like this morning, he would wake up with the first light of the day and get lost in his own world. Even when he got up to open the window to air his room, he would look up at the sky and daydream. For him, the world was a playground. He loved discipline, but he also saw bending the rules as a little bit of spoiled bravado. He had been following the same rituals to start his day for a long time. Every morning, the first thing he did was drink a large glass of water, take the trash out to the door, and pick up the milk that had been left there while he was asleep. He would draw the curtain and observe what was happening outside through the window. Although it seemed as if he was in control of his life, he did not realize that he was the one being controlled. But that morning was different from the others. He felt a gap between what was and what was not, something invisible yet unsettling, suspicious enough to make him wonder, am I wrong? It was as if time paused for a second, then continued from where it left off. He slowly headed to the bathroom, bent over the sink, and splashed cold water on his face. When he straightened up from the sink, he sensed something strange in the mirror. It was as if his reflection had stared a moment longer than he had. He blinked quickly, but what he had noticed was nothing more than a fleeting impression. The reflection was normal, just as always. A discomfort settled within him, something he couldn't explain to anyone. He didn't know exactly what it was, but something felt off. As he did every morning, he headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, but this time he was paying closer attention to every detail. The weather wasn't particularly hot, but the breeze coming through the window felt somehow a bit stronger than usual, something he wasn't used to. He saw a flock of birds taking off from between the plane trees. The birds were flying with a sense of urgency, different from their usual calm. "Perhaps I thought too much," he muttered. But this thought did not ease the restlessness in his mind. This strange change in everything was growing like an avalanche. The boy had not yet finished his breakfast. Curious about the sounds of the murmuring crowd coming from outside, he jumped up from his seat and headed for the window. Below, a group of people were excitedly talking to each other, while some were laughing as if they were making fun of what was being said. As the boy tried to understand what was being said, he noticed that a group of people were insistently talking about a crow talking. Others were laughing and arguing that this was impossible, but many were still trying to understand. Although he tried to explain such a thing with logic, the curiosity inside him pushed him into the crowd. He had to find out what was going on outside. As he approached the crowd gathered around a crow with excitement, he paid attention to what was being said. Some still could not believe what was happening. Some laughed and laughed, but some believed that a bird, and a crow at that, was talking. After all, if a parrot could talk, why couldn't an intelligent animal like a crow? Amidst the astonished looks of the crowd, the crow suddenly raised its head and shouted, "None of you belong here." The crowd fell into a terrifying silence. This was not something the boy could explain based on his observations so far. But knowing that the strange events that had started this morning were not his own delusions, gave him some relief. The crow seemed to have opened a door with its words. Feeling the uneasiness inside him even deeper, the boy quickly turned around and headed towards his home amidst the grumbling of the crowd. He entered his room with quick steps. His hands were shaking slightly as he sat at his desk, searching for answers to the questions that were going around in his head. At that moment, the crow's words were echoing in his head. He pulled the laptop on his desk towards him. He was going to search for similar cases involving crows on the search engine. Can crows imitate human speech? He approached the computer, and his eyes watched his reflection on the screen that had not yet been opened for a while. At that moment, something even stranger than the talking crow happened. The reflection in front of him was looking at him in astonishment. The boy squinted his eyes and started to look at the screen more carefully. He blinked quickly, but the reflection was still there. He was completely confused. At that moment, his reflected face suddenly smiled strangely. The smile was unnatural. It was both a strange and conscious expression. While he was looking at the screen in fear, he suddenly felt as if the reflection had taken a step towards him. Then there was a tremor on the screen and everything suddenly became blurry. He pulled back quickly. The events had become so tangled that understanding them was now impossible. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Then, slowly, he shut down his computer and began pacing his room. Every corner, every object seemed to be saying something to him in a different language. The unease inside him hung over everything like a shadow. That strange incident in the crowd earlier that morning, the crow's words, and now these thoughts in his mind. On one side, there were doubts, on the other a helpless curiosity. The boy knew there was something behind all of this. But without understanding what it was impossible to decide what to do. Suppressing his anxiety, he stood up quickly and headed straight for the window. But there was something else, another strangeness. The eyes of his reflection in the glass were moving slower than they should have. He took a step back in panic. His heart was pounding as he hurried toward the living room. This time, his reflection in the television screen felt like the gaze of a stranger, someone watching him anxiously. The boy's breathing grew faster. Suddenly, the reflection blinked. He tried to suppress the scream rising inside him, but it only made the fear grow stronger. His hands were trembling as he sat down on the couch. The cup on the table and the metal spoon lying just beside it caught his attention. Step by step, he moved closer, picked up the spoon, and tried to look at his reflection on its surface. At first, everything seemed normal, but then the reflection in the spoon suddenly narrowed its eyes and began to look directly at him. The boy flinched, wanting to drop the spoon from his hand. But this time, the reflection in the spoon started to pull him in like a vortex. The strange ripple that appeared on the surface of the spoon made the room feel as if it were warping for a brief moment. The boy tried to run in a panic, but an invisible force emerging from the spoon was drawing him closer. His vision began to darken, and everything around him became blurry. It felt as if he were falling into a void. Suddenly, his body hit the ground and his breath was knocked out of him. When he began to regain his composure, he slowly looked around. Everything was familiar, yet strangely foreign. The ceiling, the walls, and the floor he was lying on. They were all the same, but the colors were much more faded. It was as if everything was being viewed through a vibrating veil. The boy realized that this place had nothing to do with reality. He had been pulled into a reflection. There was a faint hum around him, like the sound of wind, but with an unnatural tone. He looked at his hands, and for a moment before moving them, it seemed like a faint, blurry version of his hand had moved first. At that moment, he realized something. This world, this place, it felt as though it was trying to tear him apart from within. He tried to take a step, but his legs grew heavy, as if they didn't belong to him. At that moment, a shadow slowly began to take shape in front of him and turned into a child who looked just like him. But this child was like a ghost of his own image. His skin was pale, his eyes deep and empty. Yet the strangest thing was his smile. It was a smile that didn't belong to the boy, but at the same time felt familiar. "Finally, you're here," said the pale child. "I've been waiting for you." The boy took a step back, his breath quickening. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The pale child stepped forward and replied, "I am you. I've been waiting a long time to talk to you." At these words, the boy felt a warmth and a tingling sensation on his face and in his mind. He wanted to pull back, but at the same time, there was a kind of curiosity and pull toward this pale version of himself. Why are you here?" he asked. The pale child tilted his head, took a deep breath, and calmly answered, "Because there are things hidden inside this world of yours. Things you've forgotten, suppressed, ignored, and now it's their time." The boy took a deep breath. I don't understand," he murmured, as if the words were caught in his throat. "You will," said the pale version, "but first, I need to introduce you to someone." At that moment, a familiar voice came from behind. "There's no need to be afraid, child." He lifted his head, unable to hide his fear and confusion, as he searched for the source of the voice. When he turned around, he saw the crow slowly walking toward them from the corner of the room. The old crow, eyes locked on the boy, emanated a calming aura with every step it took. One of the children had an expression of astonishment and unease, while the other wore a look of peace and trust. The wise crow, however, seemed as if it had witnessed similar things many times before. It slowly tilted its head and smiled. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you," it said. The children crouched where they were and began listening to the crow. The crow, taking slow steps, explained its words as a philosopher would. "Time ensures that everything progresses in a cyclical manner. Seeing your reflection is necessary to step into your lost world. But remember, everything only becomes real when you notice it. Here, you should not take a new step without accepting and internalizing this moment. When you align your inner world with your outer world, everything falls into place, for everything is part of one whole." The boy took a deep breath and diverted his eyes from the crow's gaze. He then turned back to the pale version of himself. As the different versions of the same body came together, the confusion he had been feeling for some time slowly began to transform into peace. In that moment, he realized that the world he was in was a reflection of his own. In fact, all of these experiences were merely a part of his inner journey. The crow's words reminded him that he needed to explore not only the outer world, but also the dark corners within himself. "Yes, everything is within you," the crow said, "and accepting this is the key to understanding the entire world. When you make peace with your reflection, everything will be beautiful as it is." The boy took a deep breath. The fear in his heart was giving way to peace. He slowly bowed his head. He was ready to face the hidden parts within him. With a calm smile, the crow said, "Believe that everything is in its place. For in the universe, everything happens exactly when it's supposed to, in the way it's meant to." Then the crow quietly withdrew and disappeared from sight for a while. The child left his pale version and started walking slowly. His path was clearer than before. As he got rid of the fears of the past and the future, the fog parted and the path opened up on its own. After a few steps, he found himself in a moment that had happened in the past. The wrong choices of a family member were before him in all their reality. An experience that had happened decades ago had been passed down from generation to generation and had caused damage to his soul for so long. The feelings of regret and guilt inside him were giving way to awareness. Reliving that moment showed him the weaknesses and indecisions of that time. The child watched what had happened, learning from the burdens and mistakes he was not responsible for. He made peace with them. The moment he truly forgave, the weights inside him melted away one by one, and time began to flow again. He was now finding clear answers to the questions about his past, and was beginning to understand where the path would lead. As the boy freed himself from the burdens of the past, he felt yet another transformation. This time, it felt as though time itself was rapidly advancing toward him on the path he was walking. He closed his eyes, and in an instant, he found himself in another world, another moment in time, stepping into a future experience. Just as he had once faced the past, now he was confronted with a potential mistake in the future. He stood at the crossroads of an opportunity, a decision, caught in the dilemma. His heart raced and his mind overflowed with possibilities. One step and everything could change, but what if he chose the wrong path? Unsure of what to do, he paused for a moment, closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He tried to recall the words of the crow. The truth was that no matter when or what happened, every choice was a part of his own path. The mistakes of the past and the successes of the future had all been carefully placed to teach him something. And now every step that shaped his future drew strength from the traces of his past. Although the boy thought he was alone, the crow had been with him throughout this entire journey. Sensing the boy's unease, the crow approached him once again, this time with more time to speak. The crow began to explain the deeper meanings behind every mistake and every decision. "Every choice is a teacher," said the crow, "and every mistake is a lesson. The future is merely an echo of the past. What truly matters is how you live in the moment." The crow's voice flowed like a river. "The real lesson is that everything is exactly as it should be. If something seems wrong to you, it's only your perspective. Time and space merge in such a way that nothing can be wrong." As the boy listened to the crow's words, he felt the peace within him deepen. Neither the shadow of the past nor the uncertainty of the future enveloped him anymore. Everything was falling into place, exactly as it was meant to. "Time is not a river," said the crow. "Time is the cycle within you." With that, the crow silently turned and flew away, disappearing from sight. It was as if time and space were merging. The boy suddenly found himself in another universe, in a different reality. The world appeared like a spinning wheel, turning with a different color palette. This was not the end of the journey. It was not a new stop, but the starting point. The sky was a different shade of blue, the sea a different shade of green. The harmony between space and time was deeply felt. There was a light in his eyes, a new awareness. He was now filled with the belief that everything was as it should be. Everything was a part of his journey. The fears of the past and the future were nothing more than shadows to him. Beyond time and space, everything was interconnected, and the crow, from afar, followed the boy with a deep smile. Now, everything had meaning. Since that day, every morning when I open the window, I search for a sound in the wind, a trace in the sky. And as I write these lines, I know that I still carry the curiosity of that child within me.